I don't mind what your name is. This here's an execution dialogue. That's what the arrogant jerk shouted through the mic while wagging his finger on Zoom like he was scolding a preschooler. Virginia Russo froze stone quiet as every jaw on the Stratwell side locked tight and each glance on the Bolton side sank into their coffee cups. The meeting had been smooth until Virginia dared to talk, walking through the final duty splits on the logistics outline for a $500 million federal works contract. 18 months of tactical operations boiled into a one-line summary when Todd, the recruiting manager from Bolton Doyle, sliced her off mid-thought like she was forecasting the wrong storm. "Excuse me, and you are?" He'd asked first, chuckling falsely like a canned sitcom villain. Then the next strike. "I don't mind who you are. This here's an execution dialogue." Just like that, a man who once pleaded for her to join his staff was suddenly pretending to forget her name. Virginia hit mute, not because words failed her. Oh, she had plenty, but because she knew silence outweighed anger when used sharp. The brand of quiet that forces others to stew in their own mess without any spoon of yours. She watched Todd ramble on, tone bouncing like a terrier on springs. Her CEO tried patching it with a shaky laugh. "Let's all focus on the greater scope," he muttered, clearly praying no one recalled the insult by Monday. Virginia did not lose it. She closed the shared deck, popped open a side folder on her desktop, and double-clicked a file named BD Insurance. Within, screenshots, marked emails, ordered timelines. Nothing noisy, nothing showy, but all exact. She had started it 2 months back because Todd always walked like rules were written only for interns. And see, right here in this instant, her hand hovering the mouse, the room frozen stiff while she masks a grin. If you're someone who relishes those tiny wins where quiet women outsmart loud men with oversized titles, maybe tap that like. Even hit subscribe. 93% of y'all hear these and vanish after one click. That fuel keeps this team buzzing to write tales like this. And trust, it's just warming up. Back on call, a throat cleared. "Virginia," her CEO said carefully. "Maybe circle back on deployment later." "Sure," she answered, tone flat as plasterboard. "I'll drop it in the recap." She didn't seem furious. She seemed like a puzzle was solved. Her screen showed 2 panes, one with Bolton's joint scope doc, the other her private notes aligned and timestamped. She was meant to be Stratwell's link for this deal, the one to keep procurement, engineering, and federal compliance flowing smooth. She didn't seek spotlight, but she surely deserved a seat. And Todd had yanked it right out from beneath her on record before federal observers who maybe missed the politics, but definitely sensed the shift. Worse, it wasn't random. The way Todd leaned on it, arrogant, guarded, superior, revealed all. He wasn't shaken. He wanted her gone from the board fully, and he'd succeed, just not his way. By close of the meeting and Virginia's mic unmuted for the standard thanks, she had already pushed 3 files to Stratwell's inner vault. 1. The original joint outline she drafted. 2. The revised version bearing Bolton Doyle's marks. 3. A transcript where Bolton staff echoed her words line for line in their slide summary. She wasn't paranoid. She was simply early. And Todd, clueless, just gifted her the shot. As teammates logged off with forced grins and the call ended, Virginia leaned back, cracked her neck, and pulled up her inbox. There it was, the mail from 3 years prior. Subject: Your decline from Todd Caro, recruiter Bolton Group. You'll regret saying no. Women like you always learn they're replaceable. Virginia smiled, not from humor, but because he'd doomed himself by typing that. When she first got it, she didn't rant or reply, only forwarded. BCC'd legal, saved it in a folder, and now had her arsenal ready. She hit print to PDF, tagged it BD Term 9.1 backup. She wasn't here to whine or post blogs about uplift. She was here to craft a record that could drown a $500 million partnership if someone crossed the line. And Buddy Todd just of headfirst wearing clown shoes. Next sunrise, Virginia scanned her inbox and frowned, not for overload, but for absence in the wrong places. The daily sync thread for the Stratwell-Bolton deal, which she'd built from nothing, suddenly moved without her. A chain she'd joined daily for 10 months was charging on like she vanished. First, she assumed glitch. Filters, access slip, random IT quirks fixed before noon. But by midday, her gut had that heavy metallic drop. The project charter was being edited. New markups from Bolton Doyle stormed in messy and fast. Her name erased from headers. The task grid she designed still there, just recolored now and claimed as a team scheme. Teamwork, apparently, meaning we'll keep your design, but scrap your credit. At 1:13 p.m., CEO pinged her on Teams. Hey, fee note. Bolton wants a simpler frame. Too many voices in play. They requested just one Stratwell rep. Not personal, purely politics. Politics. That tired corporate excuse meaning we folded. She began a reply. Erased it. Wrote another. Erased again. Then only typed noted. Tell me how I can best assist. Assist. Of course. She'd assist the hell out of it with logs, captures, enough digital rope to hang a battalion of consultants. They asked her to stick with documentation. So that's precisely what she did, though not the sort they imagined. Virginia spun up a new Notion board titled BD Backup. Within it, she built nested folders, one for mail, one for scope shifts, one for access trails. She routed her inbox to flag anything with Bolton mentions. Each time they mistakenly looped her in, she stored it. Every time a coworker forwarded her what she was excluded from, she clipped the thread with the blue forward box visible. She wasn't exaggerating. She was framing context. Context is what the loud forget. Context is what you unveil in the last meeting when everyone suddenly blinks. A week slid by. She shifted from lead strategist to ghost operations aide. Calls turned private. The Slack group she founded was shut. Bolton's PM, Paul, a spreadsheet warrior with the emotion of a microwave, quit reacting to her ESA comments. When she raised a cost gap between stages 2 and 3, his reply read, "We'll review with execs," which ironically once meant her. She stopped fixing. Instead, she cloned files they edited, side-by-side comparisons. Highlighted jargon lifted from her draft. Phrases like operational cascade, realignment, and proactive schedule integration, terms she minted in a late-night deck session fueled by Red Bull and spite. She watched as they parroted them like from some glossy consultant brief. On Thursday, she endured a prep call where Bolton Doyle presented their revised timeline. It was hers, identical, only Paul's name on the slides. After, her COO mailed, "V. Thanks for joining today. Appreciate you letting Bolton front the lead. Big picture, it's simpler this way. Flag me if urgent docs are needed." Simpler, as if cutting the author from her own design was detergent for workflow. She opened voice memos and logged, Thursday 2:47 p.m. COO cites BD Stack as theirs, though content mirrors version 10.3 from March. My inputs. She wasn't paranoid. She was accurate. Checking file access history, she found Bolton's head had entered Stratwell's locked SharePoint folder at 2:14 a.m. Saturday. The very folder housing her redlined scope drafts. The folder not meant to be external. She flagged it silently, privately, screen captured the log, archived it, stamped it, sent herself an encrypted copy. They were clueless, she still observed. By week's end, HR asked if she felt okay. Just checking, they said, like she was a frail kitten, not the same woman they once called the glue of federal delivery. She said she was fine. She always did because this wasn't about solace. It was about leverage. They didn't want her words. So she became the witness, the archivist, the collector of every stolen line, and she stood by that. She wasn't inside the room now. That was fine. Rooms had walls, but Virginia had windows, and the scene was becoming fascinating. It was during the second prep with the federal rep that Virginia spotted it. One of those moments so absurd it read like parody. Paul, Bolton Doyle's PM, stood at a projector, pointer raised, explaining how their framework would enable parallelized task clusters across phased vendor groups. Virginia didn't twitch. She blinked once, head angled like a pup catching a strange ringtone. Parallelized task clusters, her coinage, her exact phrase, the one she'd crafted during a 2 a.m. caffeine slog to explain how subcontracts could overlap without draining resources. tested it in one draft, feared it too geeky. But it stayed. She'd used it twice. Once in a footnote, once in a schedule note on page 12 of version 10.3. A locked document, internal use only. She watched Paul repeat it like he'd invented fire before an audience blind to sparks. Her face stayed calm, but inside something hardened. As soon as the call wrapped, she opened that file again. Version 10.3. Stratwell Secure Server, internal only. She'd shared it with 6 executives on her side and 1 legal checker, no one tied to Bolton. She pulled the audit trail, and there it appeared, 2:14 a.m. remote entry. IP ending .173. User handle Stratwell Consult BD integration on Microsoft. A temp profile spun up for Bolton's testing, meant to be sandbox only. Access limited to open timelines and budget shells, not her scope drafts. Yet Paul had walked into the wrong hall at the wrong hour, leaving crystal prints. She drilled further. The session ran 47 minutes. 3 pulls. 2 copies dumped to an outside drive. Everything tagged with time. She grabbed captures of the audit, not just one screen, every step, every click. She pulled meta from the taken file, using a check tool most ops folks never touch. Doc had her Stratwell in for a proposal version 10.3 last opened by Paul S. Doyle. She stared at the name 5 beats, then smirked. Of course, he hadn't bothered hiding it. She zipped the packet, encrypted, pushed it to her private OneDrive. Then opened a fresh draft illegal. Subject: odd file entry. Bolton Doyle PM. No panic. No rant. Just bullets. Unauthorized entry through sandbox login. File held strategy language later mirrored in Bolton deck. Attached, screens plus access trails. She didn't CC anyone. No reason. Legal knew how to trail breadcrumbs like these. She shut the laptop, poured a splash of scotch in her mug, sipped once, leaned back, let the weight settle. This wasn't plagiarism. It was theft. Calculated, careless, and soaked in ego heavy enough to drown a freighter. She pictured Paul's face mid-presentation. Confident nods, smug pauses, like applause was owed. The way he praised Bolton Doyle's innovation model like he'd birthed it after a retreat in Aspen. She now saw with steel certainty this was an error. They weren't only pushing her aside. They were cloning her shadow. The whole Bolton Doyle crew had been carving Stratwell's guide with stolen blades, cutting her out, pasting their grins. Fine then. She opened her private Notion and built a new entry. At the header she typed, March 9th p.m., uses proprietary phrasing from version 10.3 in client pitch. March 10th, confirmed sandbox entry. March 11th, metadata shows file pull by Paul S. Doyle. March 11th, legal flagged, digital proof stored. She hit lock, then save. That night, no sleep. Not from nerves, from math, because now it rose beyond one mail or one slight. Now it touched federal ethics. Because phrases like that, proprietary text in a joint bid, could spark IP fights. Bid tossed, even blacklisting. She'd been civil, stayed in her lane, let them smear past the lines, but now they were using her pens and submitting her picture with her name wiped. So, she quit asking and started arming the kill switch. It had sat gathering dust in archives for near 3 years, wedged between a vacation plan and a copper lease thread. But when Virginia typed Todd Caro in her search bar, it detonated like a gift mine. Subject: rear decline. Sent Tuesday, July 21st, 7:02 a.m. the morning after she rejected Bolton Doyle's federal ops director offer. The pay bloated, the title shiny, the perk shallow. But since interview 1, the air reeked of cheap cologne and silent NDAs. Final straw was a VP's offhand joke about women staff always going rogue when promoted. Virginia smiled, nodded, sent a polite decline within the hour. Todd hadn't taken it kindly. His answer was curt. 6 lines that hit condescension, insecurity, and sexism all at once. A masterclass in tone-deaf professionalism. You'll regret it. Women like you always learn they're disposable. We'll be fine. Virginia had stared that dawn, brows lifted nearly off her face. She didn't reply, didn't rage share, didn't run to HR or blast on a whisper feed. Instead, she hit forward, sent to her personal inbox, then again, BCC to Stratwell's legal, subject, FYI prior exchange, possible relevance. That. It was always Virginia's way. Her hands never trembled, not even when they should have clenched into fists. She kept notes, kept records, then she waited. Now, in the drawn-out aftermath of Bolton Doyle hijacking her work, sidelining her, pretending she was background static on a call sheet. Now the email glared like a hot blade. She reread it. Every phrase landed differently now. Before, it felt petty. Now, it was leverage. Not only emotional leverage, legal. Because Bolton had signed a shared non-disparagement clause when Stratwell agreed to co-bid. Every project lead was subject to review. Any proof of bias or misconduct on file could trigger an internal ethics review and under Clause 9.1c dissolve the partnership. She hovered on the email again, copied it, and dropped it into a private folder marked failsafe. For backup, she logged a voice note, pulled up the July 2021 thread from Todd Caro. Derogatory phrasing tied to gender after an offer rejection. Context. Now Todd leading BD side of a federal pitch. Possible breach of Clause 9.1c in Stratwell's BDMOU. Even her own calm voice surprised her. But this had always been her tempo. Let the noise whirl. She stayed anchored, waiting for gravity to flip. Next day, on a compliance call, she dropped a question. Just confirming, she said lightly, our joint MOU still binds both parties to historical misconduct affecting project credibility. Her CEO hesitated. Legal didn't. Yes, said Marcy from internal counsel. Clause 9.1c states that prior evidence of discriminatory or retaliatory behavior, if tied to present leadership, must be disclosed. Why? Virginia smiled. Just rechecking some old files. Wanted clarity. She didn't tip her hand. Not yet. But when Stratwell Legal quietly asked her for a folder that evening, and when she provided a zip-tagged historical BD correspondence / Clause 9.1c, she added nothing. The archive spoke. She knew what it meant. She knew when Todd had mocked her on that call, dismissing her as inessential, forgetting the same woman he once rushed to hire. He set off his own tripwire. He carried the knife. She'd just been gripping it all along. This wasn't revenge. It was continuity, a rhythm that opens with a smirk and ends with a contract ripped from within. And the best part, Todd still had no clue. That one email, dashed off probably while sipping his morning shake, was now the deadliest page in the binder. The kind of exhibit that gets read aloud before a project collapse. The trigger wasn't showy. No shouting. No dramatic drop. Just a beige subject line from Stratwell Legal. Follow-up on scope adjustments review. Virginia opened, skimmed, smiled. Legal was moving. They weren't calling it an inquiry. Not yet. But they were auditing partner-driven edits to the joint proposal. Every Bolton insertion, every deliverable reshuffle, every timeline tweak since Virginia had been pushed to support. That was her cue. She didn't chase the spotlight. She quietly forwarded 3 files through her side channel. First, a redline scope draft showing Bolton's edits against her original. Second, a timeline crosswalk she had built on a rainy weekend, color-coded, annotated, indisputable. Third, a file access log proving Bolton Doyle's team entered Stratwell's restricted folders outside scheduled reviews. Each artifact spoke alone. Together, they sang. No commentary, no claims, just a note. Following up per your ask. Hope these clarify edit lineage. She got no reply. That was Stratwell Legal style. Silence, paper trails, 6 a.m. wake-up calls. 2 days later, the shift showed. Not at her. She was still boxed in documentation. But in them, Paul overexplained simple edits on calls. Director Lisa stopped joking. Todd was gone. Camera dark. Name missing from prep, his sarcastic asides absent from chat. Something churned. Then came the prep meeting that proved it. Virginia, 2 rows back on the grid, muted, smiling while Lisa walked through the org chart. Slide 14. Of course, Lisa chuckled. We had to make this proposal a little less estrogen-heavy, or else the feds might think it's an internship instead of delivery. Silence. One awkward laugh, trapped between flattery and fear. Virginia didn't blink. Just jotted on her tablet. Slide 14/estrogen-heavy remark. Timestamped, saved. She didn't even need to report. Before the call ended, Stratwell HR had already pinged legal. The Slack message. It popped up 5 minutes later. HR looped in, flagged the prep call remark from BD's director. Could be material, given compliance clause on team makeup. Can you confirm you were present? She typed, yes, present. Saved the log, stored the clip. No commentary, no tone, just data. Like a quiet witness watching the arsonist step back onto the scene, matchbook still in hand. That night, HR updated the tracker. The proposal, specifically the equity and inclusion section tied to federal compliance, was now under review. And the kicker? The clause spelled out that if a partner firm was caught using discriminatory remarks or conduct, joint eligibility could be re-examined. Clause 4.3. She read it 6 times like liturgy. She didn't cheer, didn't revel, but inside, she could feel the storm swelling behind her eyes. One she didn't even have to call down. It was already forecast. By morning, her CEO pinged her for a one-on-one. No agenda. He looked worn. Hey, he started, rubbing his temple. I just want to say, I know this hasn't been ideal. You've handled it with a lot of grace. She offered a small smile. Appreciate that. He hesitated. Legal started digging into some partner history. Compliance wants clarity before final sign-off. Anything we should be aware of? She met the camera head-on, calm, exact. I think legal has what they need. He nodded slowly, gratitude mixed with unease. That's when it hit her. They knew not everything but enough. Enough to see the woman they'd quietly benched was the only one who had read every clause, tracked every edit, archived every insult. She didn't want an apology. She wanted altitude. And she was finally climbing. 3 days before the Federal Review Board pitch, Stratwell's CEO Mark, whose leadership could best be described as a shrug in human form, called an alignment huddle. No agenda, just a subject line, final prep roles, and speaking order. Virginia already knew. She didn't need a calendar ping to feel the guillotine blade lowering. The call opened with the usual filler. People laughed too loud at nothing. Someone praised Bolton Doyle's slide animations. Paul acted like he invented PowerPoint. Mark leaned in, throat cleared, wearing the fake solemnity of someone who thinks his words matter. So, small adjustment to the run of show, he began. We've aligned with BD on lead presenters. Their director will open. They feel it's cleaner if they set the narrative and we follow. Virginia's face stayed still. She was supposed to open. That was the plan for 8 months. The work, the framework, the cadence, all hers. Drafted on her whiteboard, stolen across 3 lost weekends. And now, again, erased. She nodded, slow. Of course, she said. Mark exhaled relief, like a dog spared a scolding. Then she asked, flat, sharp, surgical. Have you reviewed the compliance attachments? The air in the call went glacial. You could hear the awkward pixels blinking. I don't follow, Mark stammered. Virginia didn't sigh, didn't roll her eyes. Just clicked, shared a tab. BD submitted org chart, she said evenly. The one attached to the final scope sent to federal reviewers. She zoomed in. 1 page, 48 names, 5 from Stratwell. Hers missing. No title. No credit for strategy, ops, or sequencing. Just Paul and 3 juniors parroting her stolen framework like it was kindergarten story time. Silence. Lisa's director chuckled weakly, trying to gloss. Oh, that's probably a formatting error. I'm sure your name's in the narrative section. Virginia already had it open. She scrolled. Checked, she said. No mention. Her tone wasn't angry. That made it worse. It was final. Lisa started to speak, but Virginia cut cleanly. There's a compliance clause in the federal agreement. Section 6. Section 2.2 requires consistency between filed team rosters and the original project outline. Any major deviation without logged approval can spark a partner audit, or even full disqualification. Still, the call stayed silent. Mark finally stuttered. "We can fix this, right?" Virginia only smiled. "I'm sure legal's already reviewing." And they were, because 3 hours earlier she'd quietly submitted a packet of flagged mismatches to compliance, the org chart omission, the reused lines from her redline scope, and the audio clip of Lisa's estrogen-heavy quip from slide 14. Not a bomb yet, but the detonator. Mark's voice cracked. "Let's, regroup tomorrow and finalize corrections." Virginia closed the screen share, but didn't log out. She waited until every face vanished, Lisa twitching, Paul fake smiling, Mark ducking her gaze like it reflected something he couldn't face. Only then did she lean back, open the compliance portal, and refresh. Status. Pending review. Scope irregularities. Joint submission. She sipped cold coffee, watching the spinning icon like a countdown. They wanted silence. Fine. She let the claws do the talking. By Monday, the quiet storm Virginia had engineered finally surfaced. A real knock, her office door, not a ping. Marcy Heller, Stratwell's senior counsel, walked in, no pleasantries. She didn't sit. She set a slim folder on the desk, exhaling like she'd just read a buried will. "We pulled the original," Marcy said. "The first one." Virginia tilted her head but stayed silent. Marcy flipped the folder open, tapping the top page with a manicured nail. Clause 9.1, she recited like scripture. "No partner firm may materially alter team composition from the draft without formal consent of the originating party. Material defined as any removal or substitution of named personnel in a strategic role." Her gaze rose. "You were listed on the draft, Virginia." "I know," Virginia answered evenly. Marcy didn't grin, but her mouth twitched like someone swallowing a laugh in church. Then she slid the next page forward, a printed email from Todd Caro to Paul S. Doyle, Lisa Hahn, CC Mark Connors. Alignment opening speakers. "I don't care if she built the damn thing. The last thing we need is that ops chick droning through compliance metrics and putting people to sleep. Cut her. Keep it tight. Eddie leads, Stratwell backs. Cleaner. And honestly, we all know she's replaceable." Timestamp. For weeks ago. Virginia stared at it, not because she needed proof. She'd heard Todd sneer in her head long before it hit paper. But because now it wasn't just rude. It was binding. And worse, it was breach material. The Stratwell-Bolton MOU had been explicit. Team structure wasn't suggestion. It was condition. Todd, in his brilliance, had left a signed receipt of her removal without consent, while labeling her a replaceable drone. If he'd socked himself on camera, it would have done less damage. "Legal's interpretation is clear," Marcy said. "The current submission can't stand unless the original structure is reinstated or the change formally approved." But given the tone of this, she trailed off. Didn't need to finish. Virginia leaned back, unreadable. "I assume Stratwell never approved my removal?" "Nope. And Bolton didn't disclose to the feds?" "Correct." Virginia tapped her mug. "So we're sitting on a clause breach, a compliance violation, and documented hostility toward a strategic lead." "Hostility from the hiring manager himself," Marcy added, nodding at the ops chick line. Virginia didn't roll her eyes. Didn't scoff. She simply closed the folder with care and set it aside. "Then I suppose it's time to escalate." Marcy was ready. "CEO's office, 3 o'clock. You'll be in the room." For what it's worth, she paused, studying Virginia. "We should have listened sooner." Virginia gave the faintest smile. "You weren't supposed to." "Not yet." At 3 p.m., she stepped into the Stratwell executive conference room. Mark was already there, sitting in the chair that appeared oversized beneath him. Attorneys sat flanking both sides. His look hovered between sorrow and dread. A man replaying the footage of wreckage he caused. "Virginia," he murmured. "Grateful you're here." She gave a single nod. Didn't sit. Marcy spread the file sheet by sheet. Clause 9.1. the drafted chart, the correspondence. When she reached the phrase, "She's replaceable," Virginia caught Mark noticeably wince. No shouting, no theatrics, only a legal scalpel slicing neatly to the marrow. At last, Mark lifted his eyes. "This jeopardizes the whole filing. It nullifies it," Marcy amended. Technically, Stratwell could retract and compel an entire rebid. Mark faced Virginia. "Are you certain you'll press that far?" She finally answered. "I didn't go anywhere, Mark. They removed me. You allowed it." His lips parted, half apology flickering within his stare. Yet she ignored it. She rose, closed her file, and remarked, "I'll inform you of my recommendation tomorrow once I confer with a federal liaison." The chamber stayed hushed as she departed. No triumphant lines. No "I warned you." Merely the echo of heels on carpet and clapping imagined in minds that mistook silence for frailty. It wasn't. Silence signaled preparation. The borrowed conference hall lacked glamour, dull hotel rug, one lonely ficus at the edge, and a whiteboard collecting dust. Yet its events would torch months of billion-dollar accords and almost erase their grins. Stratwell's legal contingent summoned the side huddle under a banner of compliance review. None from Bolton Doyle were summoned, just Virginia, Marcy of Legal, a second advisor versed in federal procurement, and CEO Mark, who appeared aged 5 years since Friday. Everyone sensed disorder. None voiced it aloud until Virginia slid her phone across. Unlocked, revealing a thread marked BD Restructure Final. No flourish, no preface. Marcy picked it first, scrolled down. The external advisor leaned closer, scanning. Seconds passed. There it lay. Todd's notorious remark. "The last thing we require is that ops woman droning over compliance metrics." And an add-on cut her. "Keep it brief. BD leads. Stratwell backs." That single phrase, "BD leads. Stratwell backs," is sufficient to trigger the countdown. The external advisor exhaled long through his nose. A weary release like realizing his entire month's fee would be earned within an hour. "This," he stated, pressing the glass, "breaches federal ethics statutes." Marcy confirmed. "Correct." It destabilizes the integrity of the partnership and the sudden reshuffle with hostile wording. Clause 6.2.2 delivers partial grounds. Clause 9.1 seals it. Mark massaged his brow, staying mute. Virginia then voiced, "I suggest withdrawal." All eyes shifted her way. She offered no smile, no posture. Her tone so steady it unbalanced the table. "This detonates regardless," she explained. "Either the federal board catches the mismatch and disqualifies us mid-pitch, or exposure comes post-award sparking a public inferno linked to ethics breach. There's no clean gain here. Not with Bolton Doyle steering. We sever them today or sink beside them tomorrow." Marcy sought the external advisor, who nodded once. Firm, conclusive. "I'll draft the withdrawal note," he said. "We'll frame it as an in-house choice driven by ethical compliance." Mark remained silent. Virginia addressed him. "If you want me leading the next revision," she insisted, "it must exclude them." His face strained like swallowing stone. Then finally, "Do you believe they'll collapse absent us?" Virginia held firm. "I know they will," because unspoken truth lingered. Bolton Doyle lacked the capacity. They lacked the models. They lacked sequencing or logistical staging. All of it originated from Virginia's design. And the files stolen from Stratwell's drives at 2:14 a.m. carried the spark. She held the foundation. Should Stratwell withdraw now, citing breach and ethical misfit, federal procurement wouldn't only agree, they would probe further. They'd notice. And once they noticed, they'd uncover lines copied without credit, identities traded without consent, and one very unlucky phrase from Todd Carroll's mailbox that read almost identical to gender-based exclusion. So yes, she understood they'd collapse because she wasn't just holding a rule. She was gripping the pin, and the explosive had already been sliding beneath the desk. Marcy collected the papers. The outside lawyer outlined the first withdrawal draft on a yellow pad, real ink and paper, like he required the seriousness of handwriting. By the moment Virginia exited the chamber, the wheels were already spinning. The formal pitch was arranged in fewer than 24 hours. Bolton Doyle still didn't realize the floor below them had been severed with surgical exactness. They wouldn't hear storm. They'd hear a sentence, one measured choice, and the snap of the rope yanking their $500 million vision into emptiness. The chamber was designed for awe: oak table long enough to seat 20, sound-tight panels, 2 banners in the edge, and a jug of water untouched. The type of chamber where billion-dollar contracts were birthed or bled out quietly. Virginia placed herself 3 seats from the edge, a dark journal before her, cap off but still, Stratwell to one flank, Bolton Doyle to the other. Opposite sat 3 Federal Review reps, IDs pinned to cords, faces unreadable. Bolton Doyle was mid-presentation. Lisa, their director, was talking in that polished, flattened advisor tone that felt factory-installed at birth. Next to her, Paul tapped through the visuals. Smooth changes, bold lettering, stolen wording bursting on the wall like cheap sparks. By adopting phased harmony and parallel task groupings, Lisa said, "We guarantee zero resource overlap across purchase lanes." Virginia blinked once. Parallel task groupings, her phrase, taken directly from version 10.3 of the draft she'd created 6 weeks prior before they pushed her aside. She eyed Paul. He was nodding away like a man persuaded of his own brilliance. Lisa advanced the slides again. At last, she said, "We want to stress our inclusive design framed to center productivity without waste." Virginia's credit. Nowhere. She sensed it then. The vibration, that faint hidden current that lives behind your chest when authority moves in silence. She turned to her CEO. Mark glanced back. It wasn't inquiry. It was search for assurance. One last gut check before setting off the pin. She nodded once. No ceremony, no shouting, just a still hand sliding her phone towards Stratwell's legal rep's grip. The attorney didn't need words. He simply swiped, halted, his eyes stiffened. Then, leaning close to Mark's ear, he breathed for terms. "And the deal now." And Mark, who for months had stumbled, stalled, and excused, finally executed something clear. He shut his binder with both palms, leaned back, and declared firm and plain, "Stratwell Solutions removes itself from this combined bid on moral grounds." The quiet that lingered didn't sound like a pause. It sounded like a verdict. One of the federal reviewers wrinkled her brow. "Pardon me." Mark repeated it. Slower, harsher. "We withdraw. Active instantly." Lisa's grin shattered like glass struck by a stone. Paul let the remote slip. Bolton Doyle's counsel rose already drenched. "Can we ask for a brief recess?" But the chamber had shifted. The balance had vanished. There was no bargaining left, only the scent of something burning. Virginia rose, packed her journal, straightened her jacket like armor. She kept silent. She didn't need to. Behind her, Mark added, "Virginia Russo will command our renewed submission." Independently, the line echoed gently, then hard, as if it had been waiting in the structure. The federal panel traded looks. One nodded faintly, the sort of nod that means, finally, someone serious arrived. Virginia stepped out first, not rushing, not gloating, just steady. Her steps clicked once on the shiny floor. Then once more, the sole sound in the hall. Behind her, pages shuffled. Voices scrambled. An alliance caved like framework in a gale. By the instant she touched the lift, her device buzzed. A text from Marcy confirmed. Ethics flagged. BD cannot advance. You just drowned them. Virginia grinned. Not out of delight, out of precision. Because ultimately it wasn't fury, wasn't clamor, wasn't some viral showdown or open collapse. It was one male, one clause, one woman who declined to scream, and a $500 million fantasy that ended with the snap of a binder. Not with a blast, but with a murmur. Gratitude legends of the old workplace times. Subscribe to keep the switch sparking havoc alive. Your ex-chief is trembling in their loafers. Side-by-side markups. Phrases spotlighted lifted directly from her draft scope. Expressions like cascade workflow reset and forward-looking timeline merge, terms she created in a midnight slide grind fueled by too much energy, drink, and frustration. She noticed as they began dropping them like they'd yanked them from a consultant handbook. By Thursday, she sat through a rehearsal call where Bolton Doyle walked the crew across their revised calendar. It was hers unchanged, just with Paul's tag on the deck. Later, she got a follow-up mail from her COO. V. Thanks for sitting in today. Grateful you let Bolton carry the lead. Big picture, it's smoother this way. Tell me if anything urgent needs noting. Smoother, like erasing someone from their own draft, was polish for progress. She opened her voice notes app and spoke a log. Thursday, 2:47 p.m. COO credits BD's briefing as theirs, though content matches version 10.3 from March. My edits. She wasn't paranoid. She was exact. When she checked file entry trails, she saw Bolton's lead had unlocked Stratwell's locked SharePoint folder at 2:14 a.m. on a weekend. The same folder where her redlined scope drafts lived. The same folder not meant to be reached externally. She noted it quietly, privately, a screen record of the entry list, stored it, stamped it, sent herself a coded duplicate. They had no clue she was still tracking. End of week, HR asked if she was fine. Just touching base, they said, like she was a frail kitten, not the woman they once called the cement of federal bidding. She told them she was fine. Always did, because this wasn't about comfort. This was about steering. They didn't want her speech. So, she became the recorder, the carrier of proof, the watcher of every cut-paste deal, and backed her stance. She wasn't in the hall now. That was fine. Halls have walls, but Virginia had windows, and the outlook was getting very sharp. It was in the second drill session with the federal link that Virginia caught it. One of those beats so absurdly direct it felt like parody. Paul, Bolton Doyle's program head, was standing before a screen, marker in hand, explaining how their bid frame would allow for parallel task clusters among staged contractor groups. Virginia didn't even twitch. She just blinked once and tilted her head like a dog catching a strange tone. Parallel task clusters, her words, her exact phrase, the same wording she coined in a caffeine-soaked 2 a.m. push while describing how subcontractor calendars could overlap without eating resources. Tried it in one draft. Feared it was too geeky. But it stayed. She dropped it twice. Once in a footnote. Once in a timing outline on page 12 of version 10.3. A locked doc internal only. She watched Paul say it again like he was unveiling fire in front of a crowd that never saw a bulb. Her face stayed calm, but inside something hardened. As soon as the call shut, she opened the old file version 10.3. Stratwell Secure Hub internal only. She'd sent it to 6 execs her side, and 1 legal checker, none from Bolton. She pulled the audit trail, and there it was 2:14 a.m. accessed remote. IP ending .173 login Stratwell consult BD integration at Stratwell on Microsoft. A temp login spun for Bolton's test meant sandboxed. Entry limited to open timelines and budget shells, not her draft scopes. Except Paul had been in the wrong hall at the wrong hour, leaving bold traces. She dug more. The entry's stretch lasted 47 minutes. 3 fetches, 2 copies saved to outside drive. All time-stamped. She snapped screens of the log, not just one pane, each step, each tap. She pulled meta off the downloaded doc using a file tool few in ops even know. Document tag Stratwell in for a proposal version 10.3 last opened by Paul S. Doyle. She stared at his name 5 beats then laughed. Of course, he didn't bother to hide it. She zipped the proof into an encrypted set and pushed it to her private drive. Then she drafted a new mail to internal legal. Subject: odd file entry. Bolton Doyle PM. No fuss. No flair. Just dashes. Unauthorized file entry via sandbox login. Doc held private strategy wording later used word for word in Bolton decks. See attached grabs plus trail. She didn't CC anyone. No reason. Legal knew what crumbs like these meant. She shut her laptop, poured a shot of scotch in her coffee cup, sipped once. Then leaned back and let the weight settle. This wasn't just copy theft. This was burglary. Tactical, careless, and painted with enough pride to sink a ship. She thought about Paul's face during the pitch. All smug nods and fake pauses like waiting for cheers. The way he hailed Bolton Doyle's cooperative innovation model like he'd birthed it after a 4-day retreat in Aspen. She knew now without doubt this wasn't a mistake. They weren't only cutting her out. They were swapping her with her own echo. The full Bolton Doyle crew had been reshaping Stratwell's handbook with stolen blades, cutting her from the frame, pasting in their own smiles. So fine. She opened her private Notion and built a new sheet. The crossing beneath she typed. March 9th p.m. uses private wording from version 10.3 in client pitch. March 10th, confirmed odd entry via sandbox login. March 11th, metadata shows doc fetch by Paul S. Doyle. March 11th, legal pinged, digital proof stored. She clicked lock on sheet, then hit save. At night, she couldn't sleep. Not from nerves, from math, because now it wasn't only one mail or one